This week's parasha is Parashas Lech Lecha. And we know that one of the basic yesaides of the Messiah is twofold. There's a mitzvah to teach our children, our Talmidim, teach Torah. That's learned out from a pasuk in Devarim that says, "V'limadatem es b'nechem," that there's a din, you must teach your children and your Talmidim Torah. And then there's another aspect to this part of the Messiah of giving over, and that's called chinuch. Chinuch, people often put chinuch and Talmud Torah together. You're going into chinuch, that means you're going to be a Rebbe. But the emes is that limud Torah and chinuch are not really the same thing. They overlap for sure. They both come from the same makar, but they're two separate concepts. Whereas limud Torah is to teach the actual Torah to Talmidim and to Banim, there's an element called chinuch, which is a more encompassing ability to convey a mahalach hachayim to one's Talmidim and to one's children. And this chinuch is not learned from the pasuk of V'limadatem es b'nechem, but rather it is learned from another source. Now what that other source is, if you look in the Rambam at the end of Hilchos Machalos Asuros, where he speaks about this Indian that when you have Banim Ketanim, you're supposed to be madrich them in the proper path. You're supposed to teach them right from wrong. You're supposed to show them how to do a mitzvah, which things you're not supposed to do in life, and in general to teach them the derech hachayim that will take them throughout their entire lives. So the Rambam brings a pasuk of Chanoich Lenar al pi darkei, the pasuk that we're all familiar with in Mishlei, that you're supposed to educate young children al pi darkei, each according to their own capacity, each according to their own teva. No two children are alike. No two Talmidim are alike. If a person thinks that it's a one-size-fit-all thing, chinuch, and that, this is the way I teach, and I teach all children the same, I teach all of my Talmidim exactly the same way, without reckoning the Talmid himself or herself and how they understand life and what their temperament is and how they react to certain things, then it's going to not be a real chinuch. The chinuch is going to be lacking. And the pasuk of Chanech Lenar al pi darkei gam ki yazkin lo yasur mimenu, and if you teach them right, if you're madrich them right when they're young, then even when they get old, they will still never veer off that path. It's something like you have to train them well when they're young, and then they're going to stay on that mahalach for the rest of their life. That's what the Rambam says is the pasuk of chinuch. He's speaking about being mafresh them from machalos asuros, that children that are, let's say, about to eat something that's not kosher, so Bestin doesn't have a mitzvah to be mafresh the katan, but the mitzvah al aviv, ligar bay, the father is supposed to scold the child who's about to eat something that he shouldn't, ula frishai, and to be mafresh him, to make him go away from that isser, even though they're not yet mitzvah and mitzvahs, but in order to be machanech them, to train them b'kedusha, the Rambam says that there's a mitzvah, shene'emar, there's a chiyuv, as the pasuk in Mishlei says, Chanech Lenar al pi darkei. That's a Rambam at the end of Hilchos Machalos Asuros, Perak Yud Zayin, Halacha Chav Ches. However, if you look in the Meshech Chochmah in Parshas Vayera says that that pasuk that the Rambam brings about the makar of chinuch, that's midivrei seifrim. And very often when we speak about divrei seifrim, that means something, or divrei Kabbalah, what that means is something that's learned out of Nach, Nevi'im and Ksuvim. And many times the Rambam will prefer to bring a pasuk from divrei Kabbalah, where the pasuk is beferish trying to say the vart that he's trying to say. He will marshal a pasuk from Nach even when there's other psukim in the Torah, and where the Chazal darshan actual psukim in the Torah, the Rambam will sometimes take the option of nach, of Divrei Kabbalah, where the pasuk really speaks to the inyan that the Rambam wants to bring out. So the Meshech Chochmah says that even though the Rambam says the makar of chinuch is from chanech lenar al pi darkai, but yet you want to know the real makar for chinuch in the Torah, that there's a mitzvah to machanech your children and your family members. It comes from a pasuk by Avraham Avinu. The yesod of chinuch in the Torah, says the Meshech Chochmah, is from a pasuk in Parshas Vayera, not in Parshas Lech Lecha, but it deals with Avraham Avinu, and the pasuk says as follows. Beautiful pasuk. Ki yedativ. Yedativ is a lashon of to love, to know somebody, to be intimate with somebody, but it means a lashon of Abba. Ki yedativ, I love Avraham Avinu, says the Rebbe Shalom. What makes Avraham Avinu so beloved by the Rebbe Shalom? So the pasuk says in Vayera Yud Ches Yotes, Ki yedativ l'man asher yitzaveh es bonav ves beisei acharov. Because Avraham Avinu is excellent when it comes to commanding his children and his bayis, his household, all of his talmidim, all of the members of his group. V'shamru derech Hashem l'asais tzedakah u'mishpat. He enforces in his banim and in his talmidim to protect and to guard and to keep the ways of Hashem, to do tzedakah u'mishpat. Which means, says the Meshech Chochmah, that Avraham Avinu is the yesod hachinuch. Avraham Avinu we know is the yesod hachesed. Avraham Avinu is the yesod ha'emunah. But Avraham Avinu, according to the Meshech Chochmah, is mamish the yesod of chinuch in the Torah. You want to know what the makar is to train your children, to train your talmidim, not just limud HaTorah, but the all-encompassing chiyuv of chinuch, to be madrech your children and your talmidim in the way of Hashem. That comes from Avraham Avinu. That is a mitzvah d'oraisa which is learned from Avraham Avinu himself, which means that Avraham Avinu is the yesod hachinuch. All of the chinuch that we do comes as a direct result of the efforts of Avraham Avinu to instill in his bayis and his children the derech Hashem. And that's why Hashem loved him, because he so perfected the art of chinuch. And in fact, in this week's parsha, in Parshas Lech Lecha, we find as well the inyan of Avraham Avinu with chinuch, when Og Melech HaBashan came to give Avraham Avinu a heads up and to say that your nephew Lot, who is a Talmid of Avraham Avinu, he was part of this Banu Ubeisai. He was part of the household of Avraham Avinu. Lot was taken captive by the huge army, the very mighty army of the Daled Malachim. So Avraham Avinu, it says, Vayarek es chanichav yelidei beisai. Avraham Avinu, he armed his disciples who had been born in his house. Vayarek es chanichav yelidei beisai. We see the lashon of chinuch. His talmidim. Rashi says, talking about Eliezer. Eliezer was his Talmid Mubak. Vayarek, he armed him, and he, together with Eliezer, went to bring back light from his captivity. And Rashi says that this lashon of chinuch, of Vayarek es chanichav, means, and it's such a very big yesod that Rashi is telling us in chinuch, the first time that you do something, the inauguration, the initiation of anything is called chinuch. He brings rayas from Chanukas Habayis, Chanukas HaMizbeach. What does that mean, Chanukas Habayis? It means the inauguration of the Mizbeach, of the Beis HaMikdash. When a person buys a new house, he makes a Chanukas Habayis. It's the inauguration. It's the first step. It's the first part of the process of living in the bayis is the Chanukah. It's the starting of the training, of the breaking in process of taking something and making it now usable for the first time. That's what chinuch is. And that's the side of chinuch. Chinuch is you take a young child and you have to train him and make him understand right from wrong, the derech Hashem from the derech which is not the derech Hashem, to make him understand what a mitzvah is, the beauty of the Torah. That's what chinuch is. Chinuch is inaugurating a child's mind, a child's instincts, a child's understanding and comprehension as his brain is developing, as his personality is developing, to instill within him the Yesaidas Hadas. All of the major tenets of Yiddishkeit must be instilled in him from an early age. And that's what chinuch is all about. This is what Avraham Avinu perfected by Yarak es Chanichov. He was the master mechanech. We've spoken in previous years about how he was the one that spread emunah to the world. He was the one that gave the world concepts of chesed, that the whole world is built upon Olam Chesed Yiboneh. This year we're going to talk about Avraham Avinu in the context of him being the Av HaChinuch, the Miyased of Chinuch in the world. Now, if you'd want to see the actual halachas of Chinuch, so I would refer you to the Rambam in Hilchos Talmid Torah. There is even a special section of Shulchan Aruch, besides for the sections talking about a kavod of a Rebbe. There's a special siman in Shulchan Aruch called in Yeridea called Hilchos Melamdim. I don't know if anyone is aware of this. There's a special siman just for Rabbeim to know exactly, or for people in Chinuch to know what their responsibilities are to a Talmid in terms of how big a shir should be and other types of things, how to give over to Talmidim, and all of the laws that a Rebbe must do to be an effective Rebbe to a Talmid. Those are all very, very important and critical halachas, and of course the chiyuvim of a Talmid that he has towards his Rebbe, to be mechabed him, to fear him, to stand for him, to be able to always give him the proper respect and admiration that he... So there are chiyuvim from a Rebbe to a Talmid, there are chiyuvim from a Talmid to a Rebbe. Just like we all have learned, I'm sure, in Kiddushin Chavtes, that there's mitzvahs haben al ha'av, there's mitzvahs ha'av al haben. There's also mitzvahs between a Rebbe and a Talmid, and there's mitzvahs from a Talmid to a Rebbe. And all of these, many of these are defined in Shulchan Aruch. But there are some that are not in Shulchan Aruch. But yet it's very important to understand when we are in yeshiva and we have Rabbeim, and when we're Rabbeim and we will have Talmidim, it's important to know certain things that are not written in Shulchan Aruch. One of the major rules is that there's a fifth chelek of Shulchan Aruch. There are 4 halakim of Shulchan Aruch, that black and white halachas. But then there are certain things that are not clearly spelled out in Shulchan Aruch, which doesn't mean that, oh, it's not part of Yiddishkeit, it's not in Shulchan Aruch, I don't have to do it. These are things that sometimes are even more important than those that are spelled out clearly in Shulchan Aruch, because these are things that require a certain hashkafas hachayim, and a certain very, very delicate seichel, that only a person who has come to understand certain things in the right light can really appreciate and can understand and know, even though the Mechaber didn't choose to write it black and white. It's something that it's deeper and it's more profound and it's sometimes more important than the actual halachas that are in Shulchan Aruch. It requires common sense, but it also requires hashkafa. And I want to share with you 3 things that we learned from Avraham Avinu in these parshias, that are chiyuvim, that we learn from the Baal HaChinuch, from the master of Chinuch, Avraham Avinu, how he responded to his Talmid, and we have to learn from that how a Rebbe must act towards a Talmid, and we're going to see something how a Talmid acts to a Rebbe also from the very same parshias. Avraham Avinu, as we just said, he went into enemy territory in order to save light. When light was taken captive, Rachmana litzlan, when Yiddish soldiers are taken captive, and as we just had Baruch Hashem with Gilad Shalit that he was released, it's very, very dangerous to go and try to free somebody that's in captivity. It's very dangerous, especially when you are up against perhaps the mightiest armies of the world protecting or imprisoning this captive. You would need either you'd need a really good, team of Navy SEALs, or you'd need a really powerful army to scare the enemy into submission and give him back. Now, Avraham Avinu had neither. He wasn't a Navy SEAL, and he also didn't have an army. He had an army of two, he and Eliezer. And yet he went, as soon as he found out that Light, his Talmid, his nephew, he was a Talmid, he was part of that, he was part of the bias of Avraham Avinu. When he found out that his Talmid was taken into enemy lines, behind enemy lines, and was a captive, Avraham Avinu did not think twice. He went and he decided that if my Talmid is taken captive, I must be Meiser Nefesh for my Talmid. I have to go and mamish risk my very life. He didn't do any negotiations. He didn't hire diplomats. He went himself with Eliezer, and he biyad chazaka, and his rabbin biyad ma'atim. But he went and he was able to successfully get back his Talmid Light. And this is one very, very major yesod, I believe, when it comes to a Rebbe and a Talmid. That a Rebbe has to be understanding that you have to be Meiser Nefesh for a Talmid, literally. Not talking about Mesiras Nefesh, in a very loosely defined manner, that you have to stay up a little later at night to talk and learning with your Talmid, and you have to, never drive to even Baltimore for a chasana. That's what we call Mesiras Nefesh, but that's not what Mesiras Nefesh really is. Mesiras Nefesh for a Talmid means that you're willing to take a bullet for a Talmid. You're willing, mamish, to put your very life on the line. Imagine that Avraham Avinu not had a successful mission. It had to have crossed the mind of Avraham Avinu that I am supposed to be spreading Yiddishkeit in the world, not Yiddishkeit, but the concepts of monotheism, of Emunah and Hashem in the world. I'm supposed to be the Av of Chesed in the world. Is it worth the sacrifice to go and free out and Light? And Light wasn't exactly a prized Talmid of Avraham Avinu anyway. He was somebody who decided to move to Sedayim, and he was criticized in the Psukim and by Chazal, L'dar Dairas, Amen and Maya, terrible things about Light. But yet, because he was a Talmid's a Talmid. And I have to be Meiser Nefesh literally for a Talmid, regardless, come what may. A Talmid is in trouble, I go and help the Talmid. One very important yesod that we learned from Avraham Avinu, and we find this time and again in history, of great Gedalim Yisrael, or Elchanan Wasserman, Zecher Tzadik L'Vracha Hashem Yimkom Damav, who we learn is Torah Mamish, it's part and parcel of the whole Olam HaYeshiva is built on Rebbe Elchanan. Rebbe Elchanan was in America in 1939, the year that the Nazis invaded Poland and World War II started, and suddenly the whole world, the winds of war, instantly spread across Europe. All Yidden in Europe were in Sakana. Hitler, Yimach Shemai, was on the rise, and he declared he wasn't embarrassed to tell the world what his intentions were in terms of the Jewish people. And it was a big sakana to be in Europe as a Yid at that time. It was a big sakana to be anyone at that time in Europe. But a Yid was mamish in the crosshairs. And here was Rebbe Elchanan sitting in America. He had to raise money for his yeshiva, for his Talmidim. And there are people that went to Rebbe Elchanan and said, Rebbe, you can't go back. We're not letting you go back to Europe. It's a sakana, gedayla, to be in Europe now. You're safe in America. We will give you a shtela. You'll be a big Rosh Yeshiva here. We'll send back to Europe to fetch your two sons. He had two sons that were living in Europe. We will get them. We will support them. We will bring them here. And you'll start over again in America. But do not go back to Europe, please. They were begging him. They begged him in America, and they begged him again. He went from America to England, and there they also tried to stop him. from going back into Europe proper. And Rebbe Chanan said, you think I have 2 sons in Europe? I have 400 sons in Europe. My yeshiva is sitting in Europe, they're b'sakana gedayla. How dare I stay here in America and abandon my 400 sons who are in Europe right now, b'shas sakana? And he would also say that a captain does not leave the ship. The captain, when there's a ship that's in danger, the captain is the last one to exit the ship, not the first one. My ship is at danger, it's tossing and turning in the sea of Sakana in Europe. My yeshiva is in terrible jeopardy. I'm the captain of the ship, I belong on the ship. I have to go back to Europe and make sure to be there with my Kehillah, with my Talmidim. And he did. He went back. He lived this Yisayid of Aram Avinu to go after light, even though it cost him his life. Rebbe Chanan was caught by the Nazis on a terrible day, and he was brought to the infamous 9th Fort in Kovna, and he was shot, but he wasn't just shot, he was mutilated, and he was tortured. All because he had Mesiras Nefesh for Talmidim, because he understood the concept of what chinuch is. It's not in Shulchan Aruch, this halacha. It does not say in Shulchan Aruch that a person is mechuyev to put himself makom sakana for a Talmid. But this is something that we learn from the Av HaChinuch, from Avraham Avinu, how he was Meiser Nefesh. And this is a Messiah Ladar Ladar. That a person, a Rebbe, has to be willing to be Meiser Nefesh for a Talmid. There's a beautiful Maisa with during the Persian Gulf War in the early 90s. I don't know if any of you remember, you might not have been born then, but in the early 90s there was a Milchama that Saddam Hussein, Yamach Shemai, he was under attack by America, and he started lobbing these what was called Scud missiles into Eretz Yisrael. And these Scud missiles, they weren't sure whether or not they had biological or nuclear capability. To put in the tip, you have to put in the tip some chemicals in it. Anyway, they weren't sure, and in advance of this war, Eretz Yisrael, they were aware of the fact that this might happen, and so they handed out free gas masks to the entire population of Eretz Yisrael. And they were taught how every person has to seal their room. They have to have one sealed room in their house. And when there is a siren that goes off, which means that the Scud missiles are about to land, then because it might be chemical warfare, it might be biological things on the tips of these missiles, you have to put on the gas mask, put on the radio, and make sure, don't leave the room until you get a clear signal. And, by the way, just as an aside, there was mamish nisim miniflois in Eretz Yisrael during that tkufa. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was quoted as saying that had Anshe Knesset G'dayla been around during the Persian Gulf War, they would have for sure written a Megillah in commemoration of what the nisim that took place during this tkufa. What happened was, I think there were 39 Scud missiles that were launched from Iraq into Eretz Yisrael, and I don't believe there was one death. Now if you think, all right, but there was no biological chemical warfare on it. But you have to understand these Scud missiles were the size of school buses. If you lob a school bus into populations of people, if in Kew Garden Hills there was a school bus that's lobbed from Connecticut, you could rest assured that it's going to be there will be fatalities. And there wasn't a single fatality from a direct hit. There was some fatalities. I had a cousin who died during the Milchama because he was a Holocaust survivor, and by the first incoming Scud missile, he was so nervous about what could be that he had a heart attack. But very few people at all died during this kufa from these Scud missiles. And there was a period that you saw mamish the Yad Hashem. It was unmistakable. Anyway, so in the Mir Yeshiva, Yerushalayim, the siren went off, and the Bachrim went into their rooms, in the sealed rooms, in the dormitory. And a couple of minutes after the siren went off, and you weren't supposed to open up the sealed room for anything, there was a knock on the door, one of these rooms, and they knew not to answer. Who's there? Nosson Tzvi Finkel. Nosson Tzvi Finkel is the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir's name. And they thought it was somebody who was making a practical joke. He said, come on, you're not supposed to be out. The siren said, go back to your room, whoever it is. He said, please, it's Nosson Tzvi Finkel, please open the door. And they opened the door, they opened the tape, and sure enough, the Mir Rosh Yeshiva was there. He's a very sick man. It's a person who has Parkinson's disease. He's Surim Neiroim. And they let him into the room, of course, quickly, and they sealed up the room. They said, Rebbe, why is the Rosh Yeshiva here? The Rosh Yeshiva should be at home. He says, I was at home. He says, but then I remembered my Talmidim. How was I supposed to leave my Talmidim alone during a Shas Sakana? So I left my sealed room in my house, and I want to spend this moment with my Talmidim. He was literally Meiser Nefesh for his Talmidim. That's the aside of Avraham Avinu going behind enemy lines to rescue light. That's what a Rebbe does for a Talmud. He's Meiser Nefesh, literally. Additionally, besides for being Meiser Nefesh, besides for taking a real bullet for a Talmud, a Rebbe is also expected to be Meiser Nefesh Baruchnius. To be willing to give up even some Eilam Haba, or a lot of Eilam Haba for a Talmud. And this we also find from Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, he had light with him. And the Pasuk says, towards the beginning of the Parsha, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to Avraham Avinu, Acharei hipared light me'imai. After light separated from Avraham Avinu, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to him. And Rashi says, Kol zman she'rosha imai hayadibor perish mimenu. As long as the Rasha, not a nice way of calling light, but that's what Chazal call light. As long as light was with Avraham Avinu, the Rebbeinu Shalom did not want to be Masher Shechina with light. With Avraham Avinu, rather. You can't have me if you have to choose. You have light or you have me. You can't be with light, who's a Rasha, and expect to have me, says the Rebbeinu Shalom, come down to you and be Masher Shechina on you. Once light separated, once he went to Sedayim, then, and only then, did the Shekhinah come back. So if Shach asks the question, so why did Avraham Avinu keep light with him? Avraham Avinu was Avraham Avinu. He was the first of the others. He knew what the Rebbeinu Shalom was and how valuable it is to have a communication with the Rebbeinu Shalom, to have Ashras HaShechina. If I was Avraham Avinu, I'd say, light, it's been nice knowing you, but get out of here, because the Shekhinah is not coming to me as long as you're with me. Avraham Avinu didn't say that to light. Avraham Avinu let light stay until there was machlekes with the Rayim, and they had to part ways, but had it not been for that machlekes, Avraham Avinu would have been fine with keeping light, even at the great sacrifice of having the Rebbeinu Shalom not be with him. Rav Shach uses this to build the aside of how much of a Baal Chesed Avraham Avinu was. The chesed that he did with light was able to trump the Ashras HaShechina over him. But I'd like to apply it to this concept of a Rebbe Talmud, that if you have a Talmud, you have to be willing to give up even Ashras HaShechina, even your Ruchnius, for a Talmud. It's very difficult to be a Rebbe. It's a wonderful position, but it's extremely time consuming. And if a person understands how chashuv it is to learn Torah, and to learn Torah on a high level, and yet you find yourself teaching Bachrim of all ages, whether it's first grade or whether it's base medrash age, it doesn't matter, but you're spending valuable time giving over Torah, teaching it to younger people, and there's nothing greater than that in the world. But think about it in terms of how much time you're losing from being able yourself to steig. But that too is important and vital, to be able to understand that Mesiras Nefesh for a Talmud involves not only Olam Hazeh, but even Olam Haba. There's a beautiful Maisa with Rav Pam, Reb Pam has a Talmid, very well known, Reb Yisrael Reisman, who gives a shir in Tarvadas, one of the Rosh Yeshivas in Tarvadas. He gives the most popular shir probably in the world, in the sense that he has over 1,000 people every Motzei Shabbos, at least during most of the year, not in the summers, but he gives his shir in a shul in Flatbush, every Motzei Shabbos on Navi. He started the shir many, many years ago, maybe 20 years ago. It's interesting how it started. I think it started, there was like a mishmar, like a Motzei Shabbos mishmar program for Bachrim and Tarvadas, and somebody suggested to him, maybe, the parents that are dropping off the kids, maybe, make a small shir with them in Navi or something light that they could, have something from while they're waiting for their sons to finish learning. And, it started small. It started with a few fathers. Nebuch, they felt bad. Maybe, all right, we'll be mitzvah to the shir. And, he's a brilliant person, Rebbe Reisman, and he's very personable. He has great stories, and he knows everything. And so, and basically the shir just took off like gangbusters. And it started with maybe 10 people, then it went to 50 people. They have to, change their venue, and they eventually they're in a big Spanish shul in Flatbush on Ocean Parkway. If anyone ever is in Brooklyn on the Motzei Shabbos, it's kedai to go just to see the mammoth, just to see a man sitting on a stage, a younger person, he's not so old, and he has thousands of people, men and women, and there's video cameras in the basement and in sites all across the country. And in Baltimore, the Oldham Shul, I think, has a hookup. And, all over, they have the shir. Anyway, so he is obviously a very capable mechanech. And one year, he went to Reb Pam towards the beginning of the year, and he says, Rebbe, so I've been chinuch now for a good couple of years. I don't know how many. He says, and I really miss the geschmack of learning in Kailo. I miss having a chavrusa, learning first seder, second seder, night seder, really being able to learn on the level that I want to learn, that I could learn on. I love being in chinuch, but I also miss the rigors of really the lumdus and the full scale abilities that I'd be able to have if I was back in Kailo. And I had an idea that maybe I should take a sabbatical. Maybe 1 year would be a good idea if I were to retire, hang up my chinuch hat for a year, and go back to Kailo. It will give me a new chiyus in chinuch, and I think it would be a good idea, and I wanted to get the Rosh Yeshiva's haskam on it. So, Reb Pam says it's a horrible idea, don't even think about it. He says, well, what do you mean? I miss it, it's learning, I'm going back to... He says, when you're a Rebbe, when you decide to go into chinuch, you have to understand that it involves mesiras nefesh, even in ruchnius. You have to be prepared not to grow, if need be. And yeah, of course, if you're a Rebbe and you can make starim on the side and steig on your own ability, that's fine. But you even have to be willing to be meiser your very olam haba to be a Rebbe. To be able to be meiser nefesh, not only begashmius, but beruchnius, in order to give over to Talmidim Torah. And he says a beautiful word. He says that the pasuk says, Ki sifsei kayin yishmeru das v'tayri yivachshu mipiu ki malach Hashem tzedakah. That a Rebbe is supposed to be like a malach. The Gemara says in Chagiga, im daima arav daima l'malach Hashem tzedakah. If your Rebbe looks to you like a malach, then yivakish tayri mipiu. Then you should seek Torah from his mouth. But if not, then look for another Rebbe. If you don't look at your Rebbe as mamash being a malach, then he might not be the proper Rebbe for you. So Reb Pam says, what does this mean? A Rebbe is supposed to look like a malach. He's supposed to have like wings, what are we supposed to? What does it mean? A Rebbe is supposed to be daimel malach Hashem tzedakos. So he says, in my opinion, the pshat is that a malach we know is an oimed. A human being is greater than a malach in the sense that a human being is a mahalach. A human being is somebody who can steig, who can go mi madrega to madrega. And a malach is oimed. A malach has his mission in life, and whatever his mission is, he does, but there's no thinking outside the box. There's no being ambitious malach. There's no, I'm going to climb the corporate ladder of malachim. Whatever you're supposed to do, you do. That's what your assigned mission is. Don't be ambitious. This is what you are. You're an Aimid. And so when you want to be an effective Rebbe, you have to be a Malach Hashem Tzvakos in the sense you have to be prepared even to be an Aimid. You have to be prepared to put aside your own Hatzlacha and learning, your own ability to write beautiful Svarim, and to be a big Lamdin, and to be you're teaching Torah. You're giving over to Talmidim. If you don't have the time for that, then it's okay. You're a Malach. You have to even be prepared to be an Aimid. That's what it entails to be a Rebbe. And both of these things we learned from Avraham Avinu when he went with his relationship with light. He was Meiser Nefesh B'Guf, and he was also Meiser Nefesh B'Ruach. He was willing to give up not only his life, but even his Olam Haba, his ability to get closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom, his ability to have the Ashras HaShechina upon him. These are critical Yesaitis in what a Rebbe, somebody who wants to be a good Rebbe, has to know and has to go into the relationship understanding before he enters the world of Chinuch. And now for the Talmid's responsibilities in return, the reciprocity. If a Rebbe has to give over to his Talmidim his very life, and not only his life, but his neshama as well, so what does the Talmid have to do klapi his Rebbe? What's the responsibility in return? I mean, there's no such thing as a free lunch. You can't just sit in a shir and automatically get a Rebbe that's willing to die for you in every which way and not give back something. What is it that a Talmid owes a Rebbe? And I believe that we can learn something from light that's fascinating and very insightful. Light, of course, playing the role of the Talmid of Avraham Avinu. We find the very thing about light. Light, like we said before, Rashi himself calls him a Rasha. Light decided to leave Avraham Avinu to go after his taivas. The Gemara says that that's what was wrong with light. L'taiva yivakish nifrad. The taivas of light dictated to him, drove him away from Avraham Avinu. It's hard to imagine how a person could leave the mechitz of Avraham Avinu. Taiva. You have taivas, that will do it. Fine. He ended up marrying a woman from Sidon, the most decadent place in the world. He ended up marrying his wife, a woman from Sidon. The Eishes light that turned into the pillar of salt, she was from Sidon. It wasn't the best shidduch that he could have done. He also ended up being a shayfet in Sidon. He was a dayan. They're interesting medrashim, but at the end of the day, if you're a dayan in Sidon, if you're a shayfet in Sidon, that means you have to sort of accommodate the Mishigasin of Sidon. There are plenty of Mishigasin in Sidon. How could a person that has gone so low as light, he went from being in Mechitz Avraham Avinu to being somebody that his taivas drove to Sidon, and he basically gave up everything that he learned perhaps from Avraham Avinu by entering this world of taiva and of sin. But yet we find something amazing, that when it comes to Hachnasas Archem, he was unbelievable. Light with Hachnasas Archem, light, the Malachim come from Abraham. Next week's parasha, to visit Avraham Avinu, then they go from Avraham Avinu to Sidon. And in Sidon, it was punishable by death to have any Archim. They were very anti-chesed, anti-Achnasas Archim, anti-anything good. It was like the bizarro world of Avraham Avinu. Whatever Avraham Avinu represented, light was the exact opposite. Not light, Sidon was the exact opposite. And here, light, even though he was so assimilated into this society of Sidon to the degree that they appointed him as dayan over them, yet when it came to Achnasas Archem, suddenly it's a light that we're not even prepared to imagine that he could be. He was Machnas Eirach, he was Meiser Nefesh for Achnasas Archem. He invited them and even sent out in a perverted sort of way. He sent out his daughters just so that the people would not insist on taking the Archim. He was willing to give up his very own daughters in order to appease the crowd outside that wanted blood. that wanted to take these archim and do whatever they wanted with them. Now, where did light all of a sudden find this kayach to be so medactic in the mitzvah achlasas archim? And the teretz is that he was a Talmid. He was a good Talmid of Avraham Avinu. After all the things that happened between him and Avraham, after all of the bad blood, and after all of the disappointments that he caused Avraham Avinu, but he was a Talmid to the end. And he believed that he heard from his Rebbe, from Avraham Avinu, he saw with his own eyes how important achlasas archim was. This is Avraham Avinu's mitzvah. And he said, I am going to keep that mitzvah alive. I am going to not disappoint my Rebbe. I'm going to make sure also, even in the most dire of circumstances, even the biggest sakana, I too will follow my Rebbe's lead and be a machnas. And this is what we learn, I believe, from this relationship between Avraham and Light, a Rebbe and a Talmid. We're supposed to learn not just what the Rabbeim's chiyah, properly the Talmid is, but also what the Talmid, what a Rebbe can expect back from a Talmid. And that is that what you're taught by your Rebbe, you're supposed to keep it forever and ever. That's all a Rebbe wants. All the Rebbe wants for all of his efforts, for all the Mesiras Nefesh and time and energy in his very life. The only thing that a Rebbe expects back is not the kavod, not the standing up. Those are chiyuvim in the Shulchan Aruch. But you know what a Rebbe really wants from his choice of profession, if you will? He wants that whatever is being taught is retained and is passed over in perpetuity to Talmidim after, and to your children. Don't forget the lessons that you were taught by your Rebbeim, because that's what the Rebbe is doing it for. Shamra Zayis La'ilam, to guard all of the Torah and all of the Derech HaChaim that your Rebbe taught you forever, in all circumstances. That's what we learn from Light. Light, whatever you want to say about him, he stuck to the principles of Avraham Avinu because he saw what Avraham Avinu did for him. I can't let him down. I have to pass along these guiding principles of life myself, to be a machnas even in Sedayim. It's a very, very critical yesod. This is the yesod of Chanech L'Nara Pidarkoi. Gam ki yazkin lo yasim imenu. You have to train a Talmid, train a son according to the needs of that Talmid or son. Gam ki yazkin. And then if you do a good job, then even when he's older, when he's very old, lo yasim imenu, you won't leave it. That's what a Talmid owes back to a Rebbe. I pump in all of my kishkis into a Talmid in order to make sure that he is a good person, a Talmid Chacham, a Yarei Shamayim. The only thing that a Rebbe can expect back from a Talmid is that you follow what I teach you and stick with it for the rest of your life. Even when you're old, don't leave it. Don't abandon the teachings of your Rebbe. That's what a Rebbe did it for, and that's what you owe back to your Rebbe. It's a beautiful ma'aseh with Rav Ruderman. Rav Ruderman was a Talmid of the Alter ben Slobodka when he was young in yeshiva, a teenager. And the Alter, of course, was a master mechanech. You talk about chinuch, you have to talk about the Alter. The Alter molded men. He created all of the great Rosh Yeshivas of the world. You pick a yeshiva, I'll tell you how, somehow, some way, it's the Alter that's owed thanks for that yeshiva. Whether it's Chavetz Chaim down the block, whether David Leibowitz, who was a Talmid of the Alter, whether it's in Ner Yisrael in Baltimore, who is a Talmid, Rav Ruderman was a Talmid of the Alter, whether it's Lakewood, Rav Aaron Kotler was a Talmid of the Alter, Terva Das, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky was a Talmid of the Alter, Rav Hutner was a Talmid of the Alter, Chaim Berlin, in Eretz Yisrael, Rav Shach was a Talmid of the Alter, Panovich, and all of the yeshivas that Rav Shach was a Rebbe to the they called Rav Shach the Rosh HaYeshivas, because all the Rosh Yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael, of the Chashav Yeshivas, the major Yeshivas, the Israeli Yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael, somehow, some way, were a Talmid of Rav Shach, who was a Talmid of the Alter. So basically, and the Mir, of course, the Finkels of the Mir that we just mentioned, Nosson Tzvi Finkel was the Alter of Slobodka's name. So the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir is a descendant of him. All of this is one man's responsibility, the Alter of Slobodka. What did he do that was so special? He was able somehow, he knew the art of chinuch. He knew how to give everything to his Talmidim and to build each one up hidarkom. How to take the kaichas of each Talmid and nutz eis the kaichas, to be able to extract whatever was special about each Talmid and build it into something that was a masterpiece. So Rav Ruderman was the Talmid of the Alter when he was a bacher. And then the war happened and he grew older. The Alter died in the late 20s. And now, fast forward to, let's say, the 1970s. And Rav Ruderman was already an older man himself, and he was a Rosh Yeshiva of a major yeshiva in Baltimore. And he came up to New York for some sort, maybe it was a convention of some sort, an Aguda convention perhaps. And he was staying in a hotel in Manhattan, and he had a bacher that was with him, a heist bacher, a bacher that was taking care of his needs and driving him or whatever needed to be done. And Rav Ruderman came back to the hotel room, and this bacher says, "Oh Rebbe, you're going to be very happy. The Rosh Yeshiva is going to be thrilled." He says, "Really, why?" He says, "Somebody called, and he said that he was a friend of yours from Slobodka from 50, 60 years back, and he hasn't seen you in all these years, and somebody told him that you were in this hotel in New York, and he's going to come and visit you now. And it's going to be a great reunion." And the Rosh Yeshiva was probably so excited. Rav Ruderman put on his hat, took his briefcase, and ran out of the hotel. And he came back very, very late at night. So when he came back, the bacher asked him, "Rebbe, where did you go? This person came, and you weren't here when he came." And he was very upset, very disappointed. What happened? Marash, what was the excitement? Where did you have to run? Dr. Ruderman says, "The Alter told me 60 years ago about this bacher when he was in yeshiva that he's not a good role model for me. He's not somebody that's going to have a positive hashpah on me, and I should stay away from him. I shouldn't have any kesher with him whatsoever because he is potentially very harmful for my ruchnias." And he never told me that cherem, so to speak, was off. The Alter never said that I could have any shachas with that bacher. He told me this when I was 17 years old, and he never told me that I should be able to once again speak to him. So I had no ability to stay here and wait for him and be makabel upon him because the Alter told me when I was a young bacher that I wasn't supposed to speak to him." That's chinuch. That's chanoich l'nara pidarka gam ki yaskin liyasim imenu. When a person is in his 80s, that a person still sittering for a Rebbe, a person still trembling because his Rebbe told him something. His Rebbe was mechanech him in a certain way, and I must not veer yeminu smile from what my Rebbe taught me. That is the definition of chinuch. That's what it means to set a course for a Talmud for life. When we have Rabbeim, and we have Rebbeim when we're young, we think, all right, I had a 4th grade Rebbe, I had a 6th grade Rebbe, I had a 10th grade Rebbe, and, it's nice, but then we move on, we go to other chapters in our life, to other communities, and we build, and then we sort of lose touch with our Rebbeim, and they're like, not our Rebbeim anymore. I always say that one of my big charatas in life was that by my chasna, I didn't invite a lot of my Rebbeim, because, that's just the nature of the way it is. Who do you invite to your chasna? Who gets kibbudim under the chuppah? Who do you have? You have your Rebbeim that you're currently learning by, or maybe if you have one, super Rebbe that you're close with in Eretz Yisrael or in high school, maybe you'll invite him also. What about your 6th grade Rebbe? What about your 5th grade Rebbe that taught you El Metzias? What about your 8th grade Rebbe? What about your 10th grade Rebbe? What, they're not your Rebbeim anymore? They don't deserve an invitation more than your friends in yeshiva that you just met about 3 months ago? It doesn't make sense that people that, built you and made you and were mechanech you and were madrich you, that you completely forget about. I'm not saying that you have to, give them necessarily see the kedushin, but to send them an invitation, it should be the most basic thing that we do, but I didn't do it. And I don't think many people do it. But it's something that I have charata about. What would it have cost me? Another extra couple $100? But a Rebbe is somebody who you have for life. A Rebbe is not somebody that you throw away at the end of when shir is over, when you leave that shir, then, Eis Rebbe. A Rebbe is somebody that you take the lessons and the guidance and the lumdus and the Torah and the shiurim and the ideas and everything, the composite totality of everything that a Rebbe gave you, you're going to have that with you for life. And you must have it with you for life. You have to retain it, and you have to chazer it, and you have to give it over to Talmidim yourself and to your children. That's what a Rebbe is, and that's what a Rebbe is owed. A Rebbe must be remembered always. A Rebbe must be somebody who is adored and beloved, and constantly that you're invoking their name and their zchus. That's what a Rebbe is. A Rebbe gives so much to a Talmid. The Talmid owes a Rebbe that gam ki yaskim layosim menu, the principles, the guiding yisaidus of life that we are trained by our Rebbe to do, that we retain it, that we're proud of it, that we show the world we are proud to be Talmidim of this and this Rebbe. It's our pride. It's our gaiva. Gam ki yaskim layosim menu, don't lose sight. Do not ever forget the yisaidus that you learned. Give it over. The famous Maisa with Reb Shmuel, famous Maisa with, yeah. So, what's his first name? Reb Shimon Hyman from, what? Reb Shlomo Hyman. Reb Shlomo Hyman from Torah Das. That's what happens when you say something not on the index cards. Reb Shlomo Hyman was Rosh Yeshiva of Torah Das. And one day, he came into yeshiva. It was a snowing day, a winter storm, one of those storms that are like 2 feet high, and you have to mamish, be meiser nefesh to get to yeshiva. And most guys, it was a day off. And he came, and out of a shir of, let's say, 60 guys that would normally be there were four Bachrim came. One of the Bachrim was Rebbe Yisvei, Zecher Tzadik L'Bracha, the Rosh Yeshiva of Philadelphia. And he came in, and he gave the shir like he would as if the room was packed with guys. The regular shir he gave, and he was screaming, and he was, hollering, and he was into it, and he was schwitzing, whatever he did, with all of the Ema and the Yira and the Resses and the Zayah. He gave it all. And in the middle of the shir, one boy, had the chutzpah to say, wasn't Rebbe, different boy. The Rebbe, I don't know if you noticed, but, it's a snowstorm out there, and there's only 4 of us. So, take it easy. Like, there's no need there's not 60 people in the room, there's 4 people in the room. So, we can have the days that, there aren't that many people, it's a little bit more laid back, and you get to Rebbe to schmooze a little bit, and you get to let's make it like one of those days. So he says, you think that there are 4 Bachrim in the room? He says, there aren't 4 Bachrim. There's thousands of Bachrim in this room. Because I'm not just giving over shir to you 4. I'm giving shir to you, and your Talmidim, and your Talmidim's Talmidim. Ad Seif Kol Haderes. I'm giving it over to you, and your children, and your children's children. Ad Seif Kol Haderes. There aren't 4 people. There are thousands and thousands of people in this room, and that's why I'm yelling. Because I'm yelling throughout the Dairis. That's what a Rebbe is. A Rebbe is understanding that I'm giving over Torah not just to the immediate people in front of me, but it's a message for Dairis. It's a message which transcends time and space. And a Talmid has to retain that in order to give it over properly with Dairis. That's the chiyuv of a Rebbe to a Talmid and a Talmid to a Rebbe. This is what we learn from the Abba Chinuch from Avraham Avinu. He was a father to us in so many ways, but in terms of Chinuch, he was unparalleled in giving over the Yisaidus of Chinuch to the Dairis Habayim. And in Mitzvah Hashem, we should say Masa Yagia Maisa Maisa Avaisa Ramis of Yaakov. Have a good shot.